We're looking at chapter 4 of our text, Perception and Interpersonal Relationships. We have looked at the first segment, the interpersonal process. We looked at factors that affect the interpersonal process or influences on perception. Now, this third segment deals with common tendencies in perception. So social scientists use the term attribution to describe the process of attaching meaning to behavior. So we attribute meaning to our own behavior, to our own actions, as well as to the actions of others. But very often we use a different yardstick, a different way of measuring our actions versus somebody else's actions. So what do? We tend to make snap judgments. First impressions, very often lost. Most of us have felt badly misjudged by someone who's made an unfavorable snap judgment about ourselves. On the other hand, there are some people who can make a very good snap judgment based on very limited information, and it's because they have expertise and experience in doing so. Snap judgments can become particularly problematic when they are based on stereotypes. These are exaggerated beliefs associated with categorizing a person according to race, sex, age. These characteristics distinguish stereotypes from reasonable generalizations. The first involves categorizing others on the basis of easily recognized, but not necessarily significant characteristics. For example, the textbook uses the skin color. It's not as significant, certainly, as intelligence or achievement. The second feature that characterizes stereotyping is ascribing a set of characteristics to most or all members of a group. And then third, stereotyping involves applying that generalization now that you've applied to most, or if not all members of the group, to a particular person. And of course, we realize that everyone does not fit that stereotype at all. There's always a kernel of truth in any generalization or stereotype that we use. Another thing that we do in stereotyping is what we call implicit bias to make our judgments. Once we create and hold a particular bias, we seek out behavior that will reinforce that bias, reinforce an inaccurate belief so that we will be cognitively consistent. So one of the ways to avoid the kind of communication problems that do occur from excessive stereotyping is now to decategorize. Instead of talking about white co-workers, gay friends, or foreign students, drop all the descriptors so that you can perceive individuals more neutrally. So we cling to first impressions. We've said that already. Snap judgments are significant because our initial impression of others often carry more weight than the ones that follow. This is referred to what scientists call as the primacy effect, the tendency to pay more attention and to better recall things that happen first in a sequence. Your first impression seems to have a lasting impact on the way you view someone. The term halo effect describes the tendency to form an overall positive view of someone, a positive impression of that person based on one characteristic. So it might be physical attractiveness. Now all of a sudden that leads to them being intelligent, socially interactive, all positive things, and you are inferring these things based on one positive impression. The negative of that is the horns effect, or the devil or pitchfork effect, when one negative appraisal adversely influences the perceptions that follow. So that person cheats on their taxes, they kick their dog, all these negative things. So once we form an impression, either positive or negative, we are susceptible to confirmation bias. We tend to seek out and organize our impressions to support that opinion, whether that opinion is true or not. All right, we judge ourselves more charitably than we do others. Again, this is called fundamental attribution error, the tendency to give more weight to personal qualities than to the situation when making attributions. So if someone makes a hurtful comment, you're likely to chalk it up to their character. Something is wrong, they're mean-spirited. On the other hand, when we do the same thing, we chalk it up to the situation that caused us to act that way. It's a self-serving bias, which means that when we perform poorly, we always blame the context, the situation, external forces. And when we perform well, we credit ourselves rather than the situation. All right, we are influenced by our expectations. Expectations don't always lead to positive appraisals. There are times when we raise our expectations so high that we are set up for disappointment, and you've probably experienced that. Our expectations influence the way we see others, both positively and negatively, and of course may lead to self-fulfilling prophecy. We are influenced by the obvious. So we select stimuli from an environment that are noticeable, that is intense, it's repetitious, it's unusual, or otherwise attention-grabbing. The problem is that the most obvious factor is not necessarily the only cause or even the most significant cause. All right, so be careful when we are influenced by the obvious. We assume others are like us. They have the same attitudes and motives that we do. When we assume similarities, it certainly can lead to some problems. You might find a joke to be funny, but others might not. So sometimes you can find out the person's real position by asking them directly. Don't assume. By checking with others or making an educated guess. A large amount of research has shown again and again that our perception of others are often distorted. The moral then is clear. Don't assume your perceptions are accurate or unbiased. In the next video segment, we'll look at synchronizing our perceptions.